Another rare SpongeBob episode is The Sponge Who Could Fly, which most people probably know as the Lost episode. When I say rare, I mainly mean it's an episode that didn't really air on TV that frequently, and especially nowadays pretty much doesn't air at all. But ultimately, this is an episode that a lot of people remember because it's really iconic and has some great moments, especially the... Plus, a lot of people remember this episode because it had a huge marketing campaign. It was actually the most viewed episode of the entire series until Have You Seen This Snail came out, which is the episode where Gary goes missing. So before this episode came out, there was a big SpongeBob marathon. They were doing Burger King toys. There was like a sweepstakes if you went on Nickelodeon's website and got like the Burger King trading cards. But kind of the crux of the advertising was the idea that this was the Lost episode. Like this is like, you know, it was like a banned episode or something like that. Like they kind of were treating it that way by calling it the Lost episode, even though realistically, it's just a chronological next episode. Like it's kind of just a meta joke that this is the Lost episode. And it's honestly really, really creative and interesting for them to take that kind of approach, like having Patchy be this diehard SpongeBob fan, and this is an entire episode just about him finding a secret episode of the show. Like, that's such a unique idea. I just feel like, especially for early 2000s TV, where like, you know, fandom wasn't as big of a deal, just kind of SpongeBob was really popular, but like fandom in the way we think about it now for TV shows wasn't as prominent. So having the whole narrative be like a fan of the show is seeking out a secret episode from Nickelodeon or from a buried treasure or whatever, like that is so different. This episode just has a ton of iconic moments, like the whole SpongeBob betrayed us thing. Like I reference that all the time whenever I'm disappointed by like anything. And there's some funny trivia about that part. When Patchy goes in his room to destroy all that SpongeBob merchandise, that is all bootleg SpongeBob merchandise. As weird as it kind of sounds, it's against the law to advertise merchandise within a kids' TV show. So they had to go with using fake SpongeBob products that you can't actually buy so that they could avoid advertising to kids. Also, apparently, this episode was adapted into a musical that toured in the United Kingdom and Asia. I didn't know that. What the heck? And because this episode is so popular, it's available on a ton of DVDs. But interestingly, there's like minor changes to some of those releases. When this episode airs on TV, there's a commercial break in the middle. So there used to be a little segment with the narrator saying like, oh, will SpongeBob learn to fly? Stay tuned. But on some DVD releases, they remove that narration. Again, it's kind of just like a minor thing you wouldn't think about, but it's really interesting that they took that extra effort. So there's technically 2 versions of this episode available. There's a ton of other trivia I could bring up at a later point, but just in general, do you like this episode? Do you remember it? I mean, specifically, do you remember the hype for it? Because this episode was hyped up. There was a whole marathon. Do you have one of the Burger King toys? Like, it'd be interesting to hear about that.